Right. So just to recap what we discussed last session. During the last session, we discussed about the overview of what operations are. So just to summarize, we discussed about how at the strategic level, at the topmost level, operations um, link to each other, and each operation would have relevant processes, and processes would be linking and interfacing with one another, and each process to be successful has to have resources, and all these things have to be managed from the perspective of the four V's, which is volume, variety, variation in demand, and visibility. Out of all the four V's, the first two V's are the most important, that is volume and variety. So in an organization, organizations should realize or should make some decisions relating to whether their products or services would be high volume or high variety. If they are high volume, then they cannot have high variety. Economically, it does not make sense. And if an organization wants to make their products or services high variety, then of course they'll have to tone down on their volume. So you need to sort of balance these two very well. So that's an overview of operations. Now today we will be looking at a very important element, and that is process. What are processes? All organizations would have processes. A process will have generally two main components. One is an input, the other is an output. So you bring in an input and you use resources in the inputs to transform these resources into outputs. And in the process, there will be resources that will be used to do the transformations. There are two kind of things that you need to remember here. One is the resources that does the transformation. You get raw materials, and the raw materials get transformed into the final product. In an automobile industry, you get all the components that are being used in the assembly line process in manufacturing a vehicle, and then finally the vehicle comes out from the other end. Now, for the resources to get transformed into the final product, you also will be using resources that will be doing the transformation. This will be equipment, this will be machines, this will be people, this also will be knowledge of the people. So keeping that in mind, the second slide here shows a little bit more on what processes are. So without a process, no organization, no business unit can operate. A process is actually the building blocks of all operations. A process is a sequence of things that happens to make the final output. So if you take something like a very easy to understand operation, Um, a snack bar. A snack bar, you will have processes. So what is a snack bar? What are the processes in a snack bar? The process in a snack bar would be serving the customer, the way the order is been taken to serve the customer, and then when the food items goes below a certain level, then you replenish those food items. Okay. Can can I sort of request you to put your microphone to mute? Please switch your microphones to mute so that there won't be any feedback from external background noises. Thank you. Right, so that's actually a rudiment of a process. But processes mean a lot more than that. That's why designing a process is very important. How you design a process will dictate whether an operation is going to be successful or not. So when you design a process, you need to look at shaping the processes and the products and services. So you should look at things like, what is this operation that the process is going to feed into? How are you going to position the design? How are you going to analyze the design? And how are you going to sort of, continue improving the design of the process? Now, what happens in a lot of organizations, they get high caliber people, knowledgeable people to design a particular process. But then what happens is, after some time, they let the process sort of, takes its own course. So the downside of such a situation is, sometimes the processes that have been designed few years back still tend to sort of chug along, but without delivering what is basically required by an organization or by their operation. And that is why you need to, on a continual basis, improve the process, review the process design to see whether the process can be revamped, improved, or probably replaced by another process. So this is where all these new concepts like you're talking about lean, agile, that these theories actually come into play. What is more important is to keep on analyzing the process that has been designed and then put into place in the past. So if there's a way that things happen in your own organization, almost every year, or probably much more frequent than that, there should be a team of people to go in to review whether the processes that are being designed, that is being actually used, are effective. So change management comes into force when we actually look at designing or reviewing of the processes. So we'll come to that later as we go along. So the first task is to position the process. Where is the process positioned in your own organization, in your operation? And the second task is analysis of the process. Now, the decision as to how you are going to position the process, how you are going to design the process, the foundations or the basis for the analysis of the process will depend on the volume and variety requirements of the product and services. If the product or service is voluminous, it's high volume, then the way that you set your process, you design the process would be different to if your product or service is going to be low volume and high variety. So each process will have to depend on the outcome of the product and service in terms of its volume and variety. Now likewise, once you set the process, there will be people to activate the process, to work in the process. So which means you have to now look at job designs. Does the process require high caliber talented people, highly skilled in a particular ways of actually doing things, or does the process just sort of runs on its own, or does the process have the capability of running on its own? Now if it is the latter, if the process is capable of running on its own, then that process becomes a candidate for automation. So that is where all this robotics and automated processes comes into play. But for an automated process, the volume would be very high. If the volume is not high, then it doesn't make sense to have an automated process. Because an automated process would churn out constant volume. There won't be any variety, or where there will be a variety, but a toned down sort of set of varieties. Now, if the variety is high, then of course the type of people that is required to run the process would be different. We need highly skilled people to run a process which will deliver high variety products, high variety services. Because there is an element of decision that has to be made within the process so that it delivers different variety of the same product and service. So the volume variety requirement is very important and should be taken into consideration when we decide to design processes. Okay. So this slide, I hope you can see. If you don't see the slides, just shout, just let me know. Now this basically gives you the two elements of process design. One is you position the process, then what you do is you analyze the process. Now say for example, you want to float a business. Let's say you decide that you are tired of actually working for other people. You want to float your own business. You want to try your hand at your own business. Now what should you do first? The first thing is, once you know the nature of the business that you intend floating, you need to identify the operations in the business, and within each operation you should identify the processes that actually goes into making that operation effective. So the first thing is you broadly position the processes, and its resources. Immediately you may not require a lot of resources. What will be required is actually the process. Let's take an example. You want to put in a restaurant. Let's say you decide that you want to build a restaurant. Now, once you make that decision, the first thing is you need to identify what kind of operations that you are basically trying to include in the business? Are you going to cook your food in the restaurant, or are you going to actually bring or source or procure cooked food from outside and then serve? That's the first thing. So if you basically decide first that you're going to cook food, then you need a kitchen. Then you need to decide what kind of food are you going to actually cook. Are you going to cook general meals, or are you going to sort of prepare specialized meals? If you are going to cook general meals, then the process would be actually different. So you will have a menu, and then every day you will be preparing the food based on the menu. So the process is different there. But if you are going to serve a la carte, which means you're going to sort of have a menu with a lot of variety, and then let the customers select what they want, then of course you are looking at a completely different process. How are you going to prepare a variety of foods? Because it's not the same food that people will be ordering, it will be different. So the process is now different. So you need to be aware of positioning the process. When you say positioning, you need to identify whether it's high volume or variety, and if it is a high volume and low variety, then it will be a different process. So you need to have a sort of a blueprint, which will basically say this is how you are going to operate my kitchen to serve high volume food. Let's say rice and curry. If it is high variety, which means then you have to wait until the customer comes and places the order for you to prepare the food. So the process there is completely different then. The resources there would be completely different. Once that is set, then as we go along, we can basically refine it. You can think as you go along, okay, why don't we have a buffet? In the restaurant, we'll have a buffet. So that's now, redefining the process, analyzing and redesigning the process in such a way that improves on the previous process that was in store. So this is very important. Positioning of the process, defining the process resources. So when you want to, when you decide that you are going to float a new business, let's say example, as I said, the restaurant, then what is important is what is the first step that you need to do, what is the second, and what is the third, and so on. So this is how important process design is. Now this is a very, very simple example that I introduced or presented, but this is the same principle that is being applied to any other organization, right? So a process will depend on the complexity of your operation, and also depends on whether it is high volume, low variety, or high variety, low volume. Okay. So these are some of the examples you can basically say. You go to the supermarket, you can think of applying what we actually learned. Supermarkets they don't just stack their things randomly. There's a logic behind it, and that logic is basically the process. Say movement, it all depends on the movement of goods. Goods that are moving very fast are high volume because they have to be replenished very fast. So they will be stacked differently, in a different way, different position. Likewise, there will be specialized products, which will be actually stored separately because it's not very voluminous. These are specialized, and then they will be only be purchased by customers infrequently. So the there are certain examples in the slides. You can basically look at it, like for example chocolates, supermarkets, right? All what they boil down to is where does that product or service fit in the volume variety spectrum. So this is the fundamental question that needs to be asked by any organization, be it you're going to whether you're going to float a new organization, or whether you're going to manage an organization that has been there for a longer period. So I hope you understood what I'm basically trying to say. I hope you sort of gather the importance of the volume variety combination that needs to be applied to your product and service. Okay, right. So the next slides basically expand on what I have already described about the importance of the volume and variety on the type of product and service that any organization would decide to produce, manufacture, and sell. Okay. Now, with the products and services, rather than looking at each of these things in isolation, it is good to look at the different kinds of processes that are prevalent. So these different kinds of processes are important for different volume variety combinations. Now let's look at this slide. This starts with the top end, which is the project process. Now where project process is concerned, hope you follow me on this one. The project process is concerned, the volume is low and the variety is high. So if the volume and variety or volume is low and a variety is high for a product, then generally you should be using a project process for your product and service. Now let's give an example of what this project process is. Let's say you decide that you want to wear a pair of spectacles because you have got some problems with your eyesight. So what do? You go to a doctor and then get your eyes tested, and the doctor gives you the prescription for your eyes, then tells you, go and give this to somebody who can actually give you a pair of eyeglasses. So here we go and then get a pair of eyeglasses done for your eyes. Now the eyeglasses that you get will be different to the pair of eyeglasses that somebody else will get. The eyeglasses are customized for you, for your pair of eyes. It cannot be worn, it cannot be used by anyone else. Now, that's where you need to understand the process that is being used to churn out your eyeglasses, which is customized, which is specific to you, specific to a particular product and service. And that kind of process is called a project process. So in a project process where your volume is low, because that kind of eyeglass will not be manufactured again, because that cannot be used by any other person except by you. So therefore, your volume is low, the varieties are basically high because it's only one of a kind. And hence, it is called a project process. So you need to really understand the difference between these processes. Now let's look at the other extreme end. This is the project process, and at the bottom right, you get something called the continuous process. Now in a continuous process, what happens is your volume is very high and your variety is very low. For example, a continuous process would be crude oil extraction. So what it extracts is one particular product. Crude oil, varieties, simply non-existent. But the volume is very high, right? It extracts barrels, gallons, sometimes millions of gallons of crude oil. Now, the process that is basically required to manage that is called a continuous process, because you can basically automate that process. You can use robots, you can use high level technology to automate that process, and then you don't need really skilled labor to run that process. You only need skilled people to set up the process, set up the machine, set up the equipment. All what the workers are supposed to go and do is probably go and press a button, stop, start, check temperature, check this, check that. There are so many checking that needs to be done, but that's about all. Apart from pressing the button, because everything is being automated. Now in a continuous process, activities can be automated in a very, very high level way. So those are the two. That's the difference between a continuous process and a project process. A project process again is a process that has been used to customize product, where volume is low, your variety is going to be high. Where a continuous process is the other side of the coin, that is where your volume is very high and your variety is very low. And a continuous process, you can automate it to a high level, right? So if you really look at the left side, you can see there's something called the process flow. So process flow in a continuous process is always continuous. That is why it becomes a natural candidate for automation. A process flow in a project process is intermittent. You can't there's no continuity in the process. The activities in the process are specific to that particular product or service, like the manufacture of an eyeglass. Okay, you may not be able to predict or any consistency with the activities. Activities differ from person to person, from product to product. Now, if you look at the next one, that is the process tasks. In the process tasks, a project process is diverse, very complex, because the way that you customize will be dependent on the requirement for that particular product and service, like the eyeglass, like probably the racing car or something like that, like probably a rocket that a country is manufacturing to go to the moon or to go to any other planet. These are very, very highly specialized project processes that will be used. Whereas in a continuous process, your activities or tasks will be repeated. There are distinctive repetition in the tasks, and these tasks are highly predictable. So you don't sort of do task 1, 2, 3, and then 5. Every time you do task 1, task 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's a predictive continuity in the activities in a continuous process. That is why it becomes a natural candidate for automation. Now, if you really look at the other side, now we are talking about here the manufacturing process. If you look at the service process types, right, the principle that is applicable is the same. If the service volume is low and the variety is high, then it is termed a professional service. Example of professional service. Let's see. You have a problem that needs to be solved by a lawyer. So you go and then meet a lawyer. Now, whatever problem would be unique to you. Maybe there may be any commonalities between your problem and somebody else's problem, but more often than not, the problems are unique to you. So therefore, the solution that is given to you may not be applicable to somebody else. So therefore, it is unique, and therefore the variety is high for that particular service, but the volume is basically low. You can't actually repeat it, and that's for professional services. So likewise, on the other end of the spectrum, you get mass services. Other end of this thing, you get mass services. Excuse me. Right. Sorry about that. The other end of the spectrum, you have mass services. Now, in a mass service, again your service will be continuous. Now, let's look at some examples of this. Look at the project process. One of complex, large-scale, high work content, right? Activities are ill-defined, uncertain, right? See, this particular model of ship is an example of a product process. One kind of ship. So if you have two passenger ships that actually carry passengers, I don't think both will be exactly the same. Most of these things will be customized. Now we go to the next sort of process, intermediate process, which is called the jobbing process. Now, if you really look at the first slide here, the jobbing process sits right beneath the project processes. Now, in the jobbing process, what happens is the volume probably is slightly higher than the project process. There are certain commonalities that can be used, and the variety is also high, but not as high as the project process, right? So what really happens is there are certain commonalities that can actually be clubbed together in the jobbing. So these jobs are specialized, right? But still, the overall component, the overall product or service is of specific variety or high variety. Example, stitching a garment specific to you. Let's say, for example, you need to sort of stitch a garment, and then you go to the tailor and then you say, I want this particular garment stitched. Now, the style is a bit common, but you need the same style, but then it will be stitched to suit your body. So therefore, The volume will be slightly higher than the previous example, but the variety will be higher as well. Now, then what happens is we move into the next one. This is basically the batch process. Now, batch is a slight modification or slight improvement to the jobbing process, because you are in a batch process, you can clearly demarcate commonalities. So whatever commonalities that are there in that process, you club together. Classic example is basically in the batch processes, a vehicle manufacturing plant, vehicle component manufacturing plant. So there are certain areas in a car vehicle can be done, in a continuous process, but in a certain parts in a vehicle you need specialized treatment. Okay. Now we move into the next one, which is the mass process. Mass process is basically not as high volume as a continuous process, but slightly lower, but still, there is a significant amount of variety in that particular process. Now, an example of that would be, food items in a particular restaurant. You will be using the same food items, but churning out different kinds of products. Let's say you go to a pizza, it will be the same sort of cheese, meat items, the vegetables, flour that we will be using. But when you churn out, the combinations would be basically different. So that's more of a mass process. Now, continuous process, I've already given you an example of that. Oil refinery is a continuous process. Example of a continuous process. Right. So, services, if you really look at professional services, legal advice is a professional service. Service shop is slightly sort of more than in a service shop you get you go to the bank, and then the level of customer contact and customization are between professional service and the mass service. So you go to a bank for a particular reason. So you go to a bank and you say, I want to actually open a fixed deposit. But the amount of money that you will be putting into the fixed deposit would be different to another person who wants to open another fixed deposit. So it's a service shop. There is a little bit of customization, but probably the nature of the service would be almost common. Okay. Mass service, railway ticketing, that's a mass service, right? Is on equipment base in today's world, in the digital sort of domain. You can book it online. So it's the same sort of process. There's no major customization that is basically required for a mass service. Okay. So whatever I discussed is applicable here. It's in graphical form for you to sort of better understand this. Now, one of the reasons why this is here, one of the reasons why this particular slide is here is to explain a very important point, which is organizations tend to either over-engineer certain things or under-engineer certain things, certain processes. So organizations should be aware of the level of sophistication that is required in their processes. It's something like your organization think you want to, bring robotics into your manufacturing processes. You want to, get robots to sort of, do certain tasks that was done by the people, the staff. Now, the issue is, do you actually require that kind of sophisticated automation in your manufacturing process? Do you really require? It depends on the type of product and service that you are going to churn out. So if you are going to over-engineer that, it will be an additional cost for you. It's not actually going to give you that kind of a benefit. Likewise, if you think, okay, we'll put in the process, but they're not, interested in purchasing or using any technology whatsoever, that is, you are under-engineering that. You are not over-engineering that. You need to sort of strike a balance, the correct balance, because that is going to impinge on your cost adversely if you do not. Either it will impinge on your cost, or it will impinge on your performance. So you need to balance these and decide on the correct, most appropriate process that needs to be put into your organization. Okay? So you can sort of go through these slides. I'm just actually running through these because I've already discussed, or I've already explained what these means. But the slide sort of goes one level deeper to actually use certain insights and examples. Okay, right. So as we go along, now we come to a very interesting area. So we have got your processes. Now all this time we were describing concepts. Now, to run your process effectively, whether it will be continuous process, project process, batch process, jobbing process, you need to ground it into something that will sort of allow it to operate. And that grounding is called the layout. Where are you going to have the process? This is the physical thing. All this time you are thinking we are discussing about concepts. Now we need to take the concept and then ground it. We need to make it work. So where will the activity perform itself? How will the activity perform itself? And that arena is called the layout. So layouts have 4 categories or 4 types. One is called the fixed position layout. The second is the process layout, cell layout, and the product layout. Now, in a fixed position layout, what really happens is, right, here we are. In a fixed position layout, the fixed position layout is generally used by a project process. So you need to be very clear about the relationship between the layouts and the processes. A fixed position layout is generally used for a project layout. See, the product actually moves to the layout. The layout does not actually move to the product. Because if you want eyeglasses, you go, to a place where they manufacture eyeglasses. So you take a prescription and then they do the eyeglasses for you in that particular place. So it's a fixed position. You have to actually go in. You have to go to a place to get that thing done. So it's fixed position. The position does not move. So if you are going to float a business, you need to find out whether your business is going to use a project layout to manufacture your these services, or is it going to be a continuous process? Something that something where the product actually moves to the customer. So in this case, the customer actually moves to the product. Now, the next one is actually a functional layout. Now, in a functional layout, uh, there are certain similar activities that are grouped together. So remember the process, that the jobbing process, that is basically a jobbing process generally gets into a functional layout, because it's in a layout, in a place where the activity takes place. There's one specific thing that actually happens, and that's called a function, right? So um, even if you are going to sort of manufacture a pair of glasses, you go to the doctor or you go to a place where they manufacture the glasses, and you may find certain within the organization, there are certain things are functional. Probably the eyeglasses per se would be customized, but then the frame would be not customized. Frame would be churned out, in a batch. So that's a function. Now, affixing the lenses to the frame, it's a common activity. It's not a specific activity. You get a frame, the lenses are cut according to your size, according to the size of your eyes or whatever it is. Now that's more specialized. But fixing the eyeglasses to the frame is a common activity. Okay, so that can be done in a functional layout. Okay, then we come to a cell layout, where the materials, information, or customers that are entering the operation are pre-selected. So what happens in the cell layout? We have products differentiated by the requirement or the nature. Let's say you want to go to a supermarket. If you want to purchase vegetables, you won't be actually moving into a different section to purchase vegetables. You go to a cell layout where the vegetables are displayed. You cannot actually go to the meat section and then expect to have vegetables there. And from the supermarket perspective, they will not integrate that. They need a clear differentiation between meat products and vegetable products. So from their perspective, it's a cell layout based on the food category, the broader category of food. Then of course you will have the liquor shop within the supermarket. That's a completely different sort of an arena. So that's a cell layout. That's a separate cell. Okay. Then we go to the final layout, which is the product layout. Now, product layout is the layout that is being used for continuous processes. And if you really look at this picture, you will see hardly any people are there. It's all done by robotics. So because this kind of a sort of process, which can be actually called assembly line as well, right? There's only one particular task, a single particular task has been done by a single robot. They know exactly what needs to be done, and it's highly repetitive. So the product actually moves within a product layout. In a product layout, actually the product or service actually moves. Okay. Hope you are very clear on this. Now, so this is the relationship between the potential layout types, manufacturing process types, layouts, and service process types. So basically you can see the types of layouts between projects and services. So how they relate and how they differ from each other and one another. Okay. Right. So then what we do is, once you decide on the processes, on the layouts, then we need to think about the technology that is being used or that need to be used to make these processes, make these layouts, perform effectively. Okay. So in this case, you will see if your layout supports a high variety and low volume product, then your level of automation is going to be low because it's all highly customized. You need actually a manual intervention to make things happen, but you will be using sort of equipment which are technology savvy and then high caliber equipment, but still it's a human intervention that takes precedence over anything else. But in this case, at the bottom end, where your processes are continuous and layouts are project, there your automation can be high. Likewise, if you look at scalability, up here the scalability is low, scalability is high. In this case, you can't, sort of, for example, look at a place, you go to a jewelry shop and then you want to get a ring done. Now the jewelry shop takes your measurements of your finger and then ask you what sort of these things that you want, and then probably the jewelry shop will show you some images of the ring, and then you make a decision. Now once you make a decision and that's it, you can't sort of decide later on, once the decision is done, once the product is manufactured, you can't basically say, oh, come on, can you sort of increase the width of this, or increase the weight of gold in this, or increase the size of the diamond which is basically affixed to the... You can't do that once it's basically done. Scalability is very, very limited. But right down here, the scalability is high, where you go and then pump fuel to your vehicle. You have the option of scaling the amount of fuel that is basically required. You can have 25 gallons, 30 gallons, 40 gallons. So all restriction is only based on the capacity of your fuel tank. So your scalability in this case is very high. Connectivity. Connectivity is broad and unconstrained. When you say connectivity, is you connect one activity with the other. Right here, because of the fact that your product and service is very specialized, your connectivity is very, very limited. There is no similarity between the activities because you are customizing certain things. In this case, right on the line, at this particular point, your connectivity is, constrained. Right? Now, so these slides sort of, expand on what I have already told you. So it's a good thing that you need to, if you can go and then read through all these things. Right? The scale of technology, coupling connectivity of technology. And of course, based on that, you need to decide on the types of jobs that are required. So types of jobs will depend on the level of complexity and what kind of layout and processor that is being used. If the processes are continuous, then the job designs are much more rudimentary because it's highly automated. You only need people to go and then press certain buttons, and you need specialized people. But very few specialized people. But if you were to customize certain things, and then of course the level of jobs, the level of skills and competencies that are required by the people are much more. Okay, so you can go through these slides, which will actually give you a good understanding of what has been discussed, right? Now, before we move into the process analysis, I just want to actually tell you something that is relevant to this particular module, which is this particular module will be assessed via an examination, right? It will not be assessed via an assessment as is done with the other modules. So there is no assessment or assignment or group presentation for this module. For this module, there will be an examination. So in the examination, what will happen is you will be given, I think, probably 5 or 6 questions, and would be asked to answer 4. Answer 4. I believe the time given for the examination would be around 2 hours or probably 2.5 hours. So what is we will do some mock examination of questions as we actually go along. I hope to be in Qatar around mid-February, and we will then actually take you, or I will take you through some of the examination questions that you may be sort of presented, and then I can take you through the salient points as to how to write an examination question or what is expected. This is not A-levels or O-levels, where they expect you to write reams and reams of paper and all. What is important is to understand what the question is and then just write the exact answer that is basically required. It's not that difficult, right? It's basically not that difficult, but what is more important is to demonstrate your ability to relate the theories that you have been learned to practical examples. That's very important. So keep that in mind. So in this case, if you ask a question on the processes, layouts, then you need to be able to relate this process and layouts to a practical business scenario, right? So that's more important than knowing what is process analysis and what is volume variety matrix and that kind of thing. Okay, right. So let's move into now process analysis, which is actually very important as a business matures. As a business matures, you need to actually revisit your process and analyze this process just to ensure that it is performing the way it should. If it is not performing the way it should, you need to actually make some drastic changes. So let's look at McDonald's. Now, when McDonald's came into being, there was a time, you go into a McDonald's outlet, you stand in the queue, you go and place your order, you collect your order, and then come and start enjoying your meal. So this was called a fast food outlet. So McDonald's is actually called a fast food outlet. But some people, the fast food outlet was not fast enough. They wanted faster service. So what did McDonald's do? They analyzed their processes and then redesigned it to incorporate drive-in or drive-through, right? So in this case, what happens is they thought, okay, if we can actually have a drive process where customers drive through, place the order, collect the order from the other counter, and then drive off, that will increase the sales, and that certainly did increase the sales, right? So they are reckoning that sales will increase 1% with every 6 seconds saved. So here what is important is you're saving time for the customer. Rather than customer go and then park the vehicle, get on the vehicle, walk into the restaurant, stay in the queue, go and place the order, here you don't actually, waste time there. You don't get out the car, you use the car, you drive through, place the order from one counter, pick it up from the other counter, and then drive off. Right? So, this is one very good example of a process analysis and design. How McDonald's have really analyzed their internal processes and redesigned it to deliver performance and of course revenue. Now, grand piano, right? So traditionally what happened was grand pianos were built using individual methods which relied on craft and skills. Long time ago, it was handmade. It took ages to build a grand piano, right? But Yamaha, what happened was, they used automation to build grand pianos, but their consistency was in the tones. Initially, the consistency was in the design of the piano. But what Yamaha did was, Yamaha came up and then automated the design, but made consistency of the tone the selling point. Right? They still did pianos, but they moved the piano manufacturing from a project perspective to probably a batch perspective. We moved it down a little bit so that they can actually manufacture more number of pianos rather than, it takes ages to months to build one piano as was done in the past. Okay. Another classic example of process analysis. So these two have one example in common, that is, you analyze and then improve the processes, right, depending on whether you want to pursue quality, speed, dependability, flexibility, or cost. Remember the 5 performance objectives we discussed last. So all organizations should actually be able to, pinpoint as to which performance objective that they are more interested in pursuing to deliver performance or deliver revenue. Now, your layouts, processes would ideally depend on the performance objective an organization would be focusing on. So, if it is quality, then of course you are basically looking at a project scenario. You are looking at a customization scenario. You move into the finer aspects. So make the product a product of high quality because it's actually churned out, it's also manufactured to suit each customer's expectations. So each customer's expectation is going to be different. So you focus more on the quality. Likewise, speed. Likewise, dependability. Likewise, flexibility. I gave some examples of these kind of things last time. But what is more important is now for you to understand the essence of these performance objectives and relate them to the design and the analysis of the processes. So, if you have decided to float your own business, the first thing that you should be looking at is the product and the service portfolio. What is the product and what is service that you need to, Then the third one or second one is what kind of performance objective are you going to focus on? Are you going to focus on speed? Are you going to focus on flexibility? Are you going to focus on quality? Or are you going to focus on internal costs? So your layouts and your processes would be dependent, right, on the decision that you make regarding the performance objectives that your organization is going to pursue. Okay, so you can actually go through some of these things. It will basically tell you the most appropriate process design and the benefits uh, that organizations will get if the organization pursue uh, each of these performance objectives, right? So it's self-explanatory. I don't want to actually go and read through the slides at this point of time. Um, you need to go and then read through and try to understand this, and we can actually discuss this a little bit more when we meet face to face, right? Right. So there are some examples here. You have actually put in a good number of examples of process analysis and design. Go through these, right? Which will basically give you some insight into how organizations have used process analysis and design effectively. Now, one thing that is very important, if you want to analyze a process will have activities. So you need to be able to identify these specific activities that are in a process, right? So find out the dependencies of these activities. Now, example of let's say you go to an airport and then you get into the check-in counter. Now, being checked in is actually a process. Now, if you really want to develop, enhance the activities of a check-in experience, so what airlines should be doing is look at that process, look at the activities that are involved in that process, activities involved in the check-in. So the customer walks in, waits in the queue, places his bags, then the server takes your passport, look at your visas, check to see the authenticity of the passport, and then finally what happens is it weighs the baggage, check to see whether it is the weight is within the acceptable limits. If not, there's something that needs to be done. If at all, it is within the limits, then you are checked in and you are given the boarding pass. So these activities, if you are doing analysis, have to be mapped. And the dependencies of these activities. You can't actually do one thing without doing the other sometimes, right? You can't weigh the luggage unless you carry the luggage and then, place it in the on the weighing scale. So, some of these things. So then when you do this activity process, then you can actually go and question whether these activities are important or whether we can find different ways of managing these activities. Now, classic example, if you have flown to Malaysia, you don't have to go to the airport to check in your luggage. You can check in your luggage at Kuala Lumpur railway station, because there is this airport express that goes in from KL to the airport. So you don't have to actually carry your baggage right up to the airport check-in counter and then get your luggage checked in. Your luggage can be checked in at the railway station at KL, and then all what you do after that is actually just get into the train and then go to immigration. That's it. It's so simple as that. So these are some of these innovative process analysis that have been done by various institutes, various organizations, and with this they have improved. They improved check-in time. They improved the subsequent turnaround time of aircrafts. So process analysis and design has achieved a very high level of importance for organizations who aspire to sort of improve their performance, their productivity, even probably their revenue. Okay. So you can actually go through that one. It gives you some examples as to how to map your activities, look at the precedence diagrams, and find out exactly whether these are important, these are not important, right? Things like serial configurations, parallel configurations. You will be doing more of this when you study the module on project management practices, right? So project management practices module, I think you're already doing it. These areas will be covered in much more detailed sort of way, which allows you to map your activities and then find out the critical paths and the cost estimates, right, of completing these activities. Okay, right. So this area will be done by, will be covered in the project management. But you can actually go through that one and then relate these, to what you are going to learn in the project management module. Okay, so that's about all for the moment. Start reading on this a little bit. Start reading on this and try to understand how organizations have used processes and how they have analyzed these processes, how they've designed these processes, how they have decided on the appropriate layouts that needs to be installed to run these processes, and so forth. Okay, so that's about all. Any questions? You can unmute your mics and then probably ask any question that you would require to ask. Any questions? Hello. You can unmute your mics now and then ask any question that you would like to ask. Any clarification? Hello? Silence?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, can hear me.
Yeah, I just want to know this process analysis. You told there will be an examination for assessment.
Yes.
For these subjects, only this presentation is there for us to read, or there is other material to be read before the examination?
Generally, if you go through the presentation slides, you will be able to answer all the questions. The questions are not that difficult in the sense. It's basically, trying to sort of, find out whether you really understood the concepts, and then whether you have the capability of applying these concepts to real world scenarios. Those are the things that will be actually questioned. But what we'll do is, there are certain things that you can actually refer to. As we go along, we will upload these literature, whatever literature we have, because whatever literature we have has been actually summarized and put it into presentation, so that it makes life easy.
Yes, okay.
Rather than for people to sort of go and spend time reading through sort of voluminous material.
Yeah.
So, but we will upload certain sort of detailed literature on some of these things. Now, as we actually go along, we'll be doing things like quality, lean, demand forecasting, and so forth and all. So whenever you have the time, you can actually go and refer to that. But remember this, you use the slides as a starting point, because that is much more important than actually going and reading something and then try to
Okay.
sort of come back here, because the slides that have been compiled take into consideration almost most of the literature that is lying around.
Yeah.
Um, and so, hope I answered your question.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other question? Okay then. So what you can do is, if you find if you are not sure about certain things, you want any clarification, you can uh, email me your questions
Yeah.
to, this is my email address. You can email me to jj@next.lk. Any clarification, any question that you need to ask. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for attendance.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.